She's a rock star.
Yeah,
Let's get that song going because I got the recording on.
Oh, no. Okay.
Let them in.
Come on in, it's Feedback Friday. Come on in, I'm admitting you all. Yeah, yeah. Hi, Kathy Green.
You're on mute.
Susan Cooper.
You're on mute.
Hello. Are we doing Feedback Friday? The intro song?
And I'm not muting
Yes,
myself,
it's the intro
Kathy.
song. You're all supposed to be singing it with us.
Let's sing Feedback Friday.
Yeah, they're all going.
Feedback
Yes.
Feedback Friday.
Heidi Iverson wants to totally sing, I can tell.
Let it out, everyone.
Let it out.
It's been a week.
Freeze, honey, Katir, that's all we care about.
Oh, Cheryl Lawrence is here. Oh, your mom's here, Amy.
Where is she?
Hello, LED.
Where's
Where is
LED?
she? Oh, my computer's gonna make sure you're plugged in, everyone.
I don't see my mom here, but she's here somewhere.
Where is
For
she?
the first time.
Yeah, it's her.
Oh,
first
wow, Kathy,
week.
your background is so pretty.
Oh, thank you.
Let's see.
It's Laharia. Do you know Laharia? It's this very intricate tie-dye from
Yes.
Jaipur, Rajasthan area.
Yeah.
And
I have, my mom gave me a dupatta, you know, the
oh,
one
really? Yeah.
Yeah.
With Laharia.
Yes, when you kind of wash it with your hand, I used it to put it over my bed sheet to sleep on.
Yes.
Yes, so she got me like a bundle of them because my grandmother, she uses the Bengal cotton sarees.
Yeah.
And if you wash them for like ever and they're like so soft, so
I know.
soft. Yeah, I put them over my bed sheets. I actually carry them when I travel too.
Oh, no, that's the best thing. I always carry like one piece that is the blanket, everything. It's kind of like, you know, where we used to have stuffed animals. Now I just carry one textile anytime I travel. Yeah. All right. How we doing? We're still,
We're just
early.
admitting people. We
are.
As if I were two people. I am more than one.
I still haven't seen LED. Where is she?
Yeah, I thought you said that she was here.
I saw her name, but I haven't seen her person.
Let's see. Wow. Yeah, we've got the people who are like, I don't want to show up right away. I'm just going to give myself some time. So I'm like,
who said that?
Well, that's what people do, and they show up a little late. For
fashionably late
for the party.
Something.
All right. Well, you're all looking pretty perky. That's good.
Yeah.
Hi, Celeste. Looks like you have a knee warmer there. That's cute.
I love that everybody's got these amazing studios, and not everybody, of course. Some people just have amazing lighting, amazing book collections.
Yeah, we see lots of books. Lots of books.
Like we get it. You guys are so smart. You're so smart with all those books.
All right. It looks, Amy, like we have got many of our participants in the house.
Okay.
And so we're going to go ahead and get started. So welcome, everyone. Welcome to Feedback Friday. It's our, I have my little crib sheet here, so if my eyes are darting, that's why. It is episode 17. 17. We've done 17 of these now. We're finally kind of getting the hang of it. And our guest today is Tilka Elkins from Wild Pigment Project. We're super excited to welcome Tilka. We're recording this session, so if you have to drop out a bit or weren't able to make it, those of you who aren't here, I'm talking to you right now. We will have this on our blog and you can download and watch it, and you'll hear the Amy theme song. Next week, I would like all of you to participate Amy, you're gonna have to send out some lyrics or something so that people know what
Maybe
to be
we
singing.
should start crowdsourcing the intro.
Yeah, let's crowdsource the intro.
Yeah, you probably could use some help with a better singer than that.
Yeah, that wasn't anything that I ever was good at. So yeah, any of you aspiring vocalists and or musicians out there, we would welcome a little intro noise, and then we'll get started.
I like it.
So what Feedback Friday is our weekly show where we speak with dyers, artists, scientists, and scholars about our favorite topic, which is natural dyes and color. And you all know me pretty much, but I'm Kathy Hattori, president of Botanical Colors, and joining me is Amy Dufo, who has really become like my partner in crime here on this program. And she's our sustainability and social media director, and she'll be running the moderating and chat for Feedback Friday. So many of you have purchased dyes from us. We also have a custom natural dye house here in Seattle. And social distancing and doing production has proved to be a very interesting little proposition, but we're still doing it. Before we start, I really want to thank everybody for both joining us here and all of your support. You guys have just totally shown up to help out some of the artists that we've been featuring, Kibibi Ajanku and her summer camp, Porfirio Gutierrez and his natural dye studio outside of Oaxaca, and Abu Bakar Fofana and him setting up a new studio in France because he's currently unable to travel back to his home base in Mali. You guys have shown incredible support for all of these artists and more. And so I really just want to thank you. We could not do this without you, and what you're doing to participate and assist has made a huge difference for everyone. So thank you very, very much. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. All right, so how this works is Amy's going to be our moderator. She pretty much puts everybody on mute until Tilka's done with her presentation, and then we'll open it up for questions. And what else?
Yes, Kathy. Yes, I was wondering if we could just mention, I seem to be muting a lot of people. So can everybody just make sure they're muted?
Yes, if you can make sure you're muted, that would be great. And then we'll unmute for at the end so everybody could say hello, and Amy will sing the outro theme song.
Can I say one more thing?
Yes.
Hi, Mom, wherever you are out there, because I can't
Hi, LED.
Hi,
we don't know where you are. If you unmute and start talking, we'll be able to see you.
Oh, I don't know if she can do that.
Okay.
She's just learning about this Zoom.
She just learned. All right. Okay, so let me go to our intro without any further ado. Our presenter today is Tilka Elkins, founder of Wild Pigment Project. Wild Pigment Project supports the global art community to use pigments that reflect values of racial, economic, and ecological equity for all. They do this by fostering a network of artists, foragers, designers, craftspersons, scientists, farmers, researchers, ecologists, and everybody else, anyone who's passionate about wild pigments. The project aspires to provide generous resources, and they absolutely do, to facilitate learning about land stewardship through ethically gathered botanical, mineral, and waste stream-derived materials to make paint, ink, and dye. Tilka, we are so honored to have you here. Very excited to see and hear what you're going to be talking about. And so with no further ado, Amy, unless there's something else, I'm going to turn it over to Tilka to start her presentation.
Oh, I'm gonna.
How's that? Yeah. Thank you so much, Kathy and Amy, for having me on to Feedback Friday. It's such an honor to be here. I really appreciate sharing this community and what you're creating here with this every week. And I'm really grateful to all of you who are tuning in right now for your presence and your attention, and for being here with me today. So thank you for being here. I also would like to really thank everyone who has supported Wild Pigment Project this year. I've just received so much encouragement and participation from my mentors, without whom this wouldn't exist, and also from my students, and from all the artists who've contributed pigment to Ground Bright, and just really everyone who has shared kinship with me on social media, and all the pigment people who have contributed experience and knowledge to this project as well. I'm so grateful to all of you. I'm also really grateful to this land where I live, which I'm going to be showing pictures of soon. But this is the ancestral homelands of the Kalapuya people, and I really honor this place, and I'm so grateful for the collaboration that I've experienced with the land here and with the Kalapuya people that I have connected with through my curiosity about pigments, and I'll be sharing more about that in my presentation. So without any more mumbling, I'm going to do something that might be slightly unusual for Feedback Friday. I'm a writer, and so that's a natural way for me to express myself, and so I have some things that I really want to say clearly, ideas that have come out of conversations with my mentor, Melanie Anchetta, who is a native researcher and artist who has spent the last 20 years researching Pacific Northwest Coast native art. And also, so we've been in conversations, and I've also been really inspired by another friend and mentor of mine, Heidi Gustafson, who many of you may know. She's an ochre expert, and she was recently interviewed on the podcast Knitted Heart, and she just said some really profound things that resonated deeply with me. So all of these ideas are kind of coming together in this little thing that I'm going to read, and I don't want to just sort of sound like a robot reading here, so I'm going to try and be as relaxed as possible about it. And it's going to take me about 3 minutes to read this, so if you want to knit or put your head down or, you know, relax while you listen, that would be great. Just think of it as a sort of word song happening here. So I'm a part of a culture, which is white, Western, settler, colonizer, Euro-American culture, that has for many hundreds of years shamed and punished anyone who behaved as though all is connected and alive. It's a culture that has severed spirit from matter, and this severance is the origin of capitalism as we know it. It's what's allowed many humans to treat the whole planet and everyone on it as though they're there to be extracted and used. Instead of relating to matter as life and asking, what's my relationship with this being? White culture, capitalist culture asks, what can I get out of this? Or how can it serve me? Two recent Feedback Friday guests that I watched gave their own different cultural perspectives. Kabibi Ajanku talked about bringing the meaning into the material and asking, what is the work we must do? Also, I was really inspired by Abubakar Fofana, who pointed out that in his culture, there's so much more to working with indigo than the outcome of the plant. So while blue may be the outcome, he says, the relationship with the plant is about, you know, its medicine, its protective bacteria, its ability to act as a link between the spiritual and the human, and just all this rich relationship with the plant. As well as the fact that the plant gives its spirit so that these things can happen. So we're in this really intense time with global warming and the pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement that I really feel is bringing into focus for people, especially for people raised in capitalist culture, a longing for meaningful living relationships with matter. And that is connected to the awareness that that these relationships, real equitable relationships between people and land, mean going deep into a dialogue on a spirit level with the land itself directly about the pain and damage that the culture of white supremacy has brought. Like me, I think many white people feel so far removed from a culture of origin that isn't extractive and severing that looking for these roots feels kind of impossible, or at least, yeah, challenging. But for many people on this continent, The powerful presence of this land has offered an entry point back into spirit. Excuse me. So relationship with the land, with the incredible mountains and the fields and the forests and the cities and the parks and everything that's in this land here. However, in order for true communication to take place here, we as white people especially need to engage with the land, not by appropriating the spiritual practices of other cultures, but by going deep into the damaging histories our ancestors brought here and dialoguing sincerely with the land about those histories. So foraging for rocks and breaking them open, or futuring soil, as Heidi calls it, which I think is a great term, because we, like the wind, we break down soil when we grind it. We break down rocks and they become soil. Or gathering plants and working with their essences. These things have the potential to be sensual, embodied, wordless dialogues that bring about meaningful reciprocal relationships and healing. Wild pigments can act as a bridge between severed abstract thinking, like the idea of red, and matter joined to meaning, so red ochre from the hill behind the house where I live. Even though I have a deep, complex connection to place, I sometimes watch myself fall back on extractive language when I'm teaching and sharing what I know about wild pigments with my students. For anyone raised in my culture, it can be a lot more comfortable for me to talk about the use of a plant or a stone than it is for me to make an introduction to matter, to introduce people, and as though it's a friendship, and see what happens. But that's really the goal in my heart. And if you remember nothing else from this presentation, I invite you to remember that. Thank you. Thanks so much for listening. Now I'm going to go into a visual presentation, and I'm going to do the magical screen sharing thing here. And I have a lot of images here, and okay, share the screen, go to the thing, press the thing. Okay, can you all see that? I can't see you, so I'm going to assume you can. So yeah, these are a lot of images, and just let them kind of wash over you. I want this to be kind of just a.
I can hear what's going on, but
Can you not see it?
I'm not.
Uh-oh.
There's a line across my battery.
Kathy, is that you?
We're good. No, that's
Okay.
Ellie.
Okay. So you can see it?
We can definitely see your slides. Yeah.
Okay, and you can see me too, is that true?
Absolutely, you're
I
in a
can see
little
you.
window.
Okay, I'm in the tiny window. Hi,
Yep.
everyone. This is so fun. Okay, so this is Wild Pigment Project, and I started it as a social practice piece. That's how I think of it. It looks like an organization, but I think of it as a social practice art piece that, and the goal for me as a social practice artist is to increase the connection for artists with meaningful material and their connection to the land. And so that is kind of the aim of this project. So I wanted to start by situating you where I am, which is here in the Willamette Valley, in the time of wild carrot. This is a field that is near my house. I live in a pretty urban area, which you can't tell by seeing this picture, but this is just across the street from my studio. This is the Willamette River, that's what it's known as. This whole area is the ancestral homelands of the Kalapuya people, as I mentioned. And through my questions about pigment, I had the great good fortune to meet with a citizen group here in Springfield and Eugene that has been collaborating with the Kalapuya people and Elder Esther Stutzman for the last 20 years or so on a project to create these, oops, oh dear, it's doing that thing, Kathy, that you said it might do.
Sometimes it's just a little bit delayed.
Okay, shall we wait? Well, I'll just explain.
Yeah.
They're stones that are placed in a natural park, and they have Kalapuya words on them that relate to the area, and each stone has been blessed by Esther Stutzman as a sacred site. And so through this project, I connected with her and I asked her about pigments that Kalapuya people use, and she said that because it's largely a botanical based material culture that a lot of those pigments have been lost or are fugitive. So that was really interesting to me because it's not a stone-based pigment culture.
You know what you might need to do is
Yeah.
hit your escape.
Yeah.
And then,
Oh dear. Oh,
are
dear.
you stuck?
Oh dear.
Maybe Noelle can help. Don't.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh wait, I think it's
there it
working now.
goes. There
Okay.
it goes.
So this is the talking stone that I was referring to.
Ah, nice.
So Esther also told me that this river used to move a lot. And so the culture around the river was very different. Here's my studio, my little studio. It's in the backyard. I built it with friends and of a house where I live now with Noelle, but for 14 years, I lived in community in this house and we moved in, 7 of us. And this is Noelle's beautiful garden. I'd just like to pause here and thank Noelle for all the support that she gives me. In addition to thanking my family and my friends this year for all the amazing support that they have given me my whole life. Just so much encouragement to follow my own path. And that's really why I'm here today. So thank you. This is Noelle's garden. And I think it's nice to know that about a third of the plants in this garden just come back every year and have been doing that for about 15 years. And so they are doing their own thing. So here's the inside of my studio, and I'm not going to spend too long on this, but this is kind of where I make work. My natural pigments, some of my materials. And it seems like when I go a little too fast, it doesn't like that. Which is funny because it was not doing this at all, of course, in the practice test.
Yeah, it chooses its time that it wants.
It does. Okay, it's telling me that it's time to slow down a little. So
yeah,
here we have some of the pigments that I use. I really like green. When I was first interested in these pigments, I was worried that I wasn't going to be able to find greens that I liked. So that's been a journey. I don't mind slowing down, but I do have an awful lot of slides. So it would be nice to be able to show them all to you.
Did you try the escape and then try to go back to like?
Yeah, let's see. Okay, I think maybe if I click in a different spot.
Okay.
So here are more of my materials in my studio. And here, this is the studio. So this is the room where a lot of my Wild Pigment Project stuff happens. And I have the Wild Pigment Project library and teaching materials. And these are materials that I use for teaching and for Ground Bright. And here is part of the library. I have ground pigments and then I have some more solid pigments. Here's some tools. And these are some rocks. This is about 2 or 3 kind of foraging trips worth of minerals that I've gathered this summer. So I want to talk a bit about what is a wild pigment, because I use that term a little bit differently than some may be familiar with. For me, wild indicates an interspecies community. So, and that's in the eye of the perceiver. So that can be a remote place in the mountains, or it can be your backyard, or it can even be your own body if you're able to perceive all of the creatures that live in your eyebrows and so on, because they're there. So that's how I use wild. So urban places and remote places, it's all wild. So this is a place that it really obviously has a lot of pigment. This is in Utah, and I'm going to speak somewhat non-specifically about the foraging places that I'm showing you, because I really think that it's important that people develop their own relationships to place and that they get there through those relationships rather than just go there seeking pigment because they saw a picture of the pigment. So this is in Utah, and you wouldn't have any question as to what this was when you saw it. It's seladanite, which is an iron-based pigment. This is also Utah, and it's a ferric oxide red ochre pigment. And ochre is really just sand or clay or rock that contains a really high percentage of iron. But that can manifest in many different hues, everywhere from red, orange, green, yellow, purple, pink, an amazing array of color. So there they are together. This is at a disturbed site in Oregon. Beautiful greens, probably chlorite. I don't test my minerals at this stage, but it's a good practice for me to really tune in and see if I can identify them. And that's just a slow growth process. So this is what pigments can look like when you find them in a disturbed site. This was a landslide near a clear cut. And this is what the land near that place looks like, beautiful bachelor's buttons. So being in a place is about connecting. But most of my pigments I actually get on little stream beds like this. So this is a place where it's not quite as obvious that there's a lot of stones that might be good for making paint, because stones have different densities, different textures, and different proportions of silica. Silica is basically glass. So when you crush glass, you get a clear pigment. And you may find a rock that you think is a really beautiful color, but when you go to try and crush it, it's very, very hard. So it's a subtle process of tuning into the place. And I want to just take a moment now to talk about my own personal guidelines for ethical foraging, many of which I've learned from Heidi, and also just some that I brought to my experience from my own connections with the land. So the first one for me is really to know as much as I can about the history of the land, to learn whether the land has a ceremonial sacred space on it, and that I shouldn't gather pigment there, and to do everything I can to learn about any legalities that might exist, and to just really have, really go deep into a personal connection. That's the primary point of entry for foraging, I think. The second one is when I arrive at the place to sort of drop in, feel like I'm saying hello and communicating, and that gives me the space to notice who's there, who are the plants. Is it a sensitive area? Is it okay for me to pick things up here? So those are all really important. And then when it comes to gathering, one of Heidi's guidelines that I really love is to only take what I can carry in 2 hands. And for me, another important aspect to that is to know why I'm gathering this material. Does it have a specific project that it's designated for? Because that way I can be in dialogue with the place and the material and say, do you want to come and be part of this project? This is what I'm looking for collaboration with. And lastly, I like to give an offering of some kind, whether it's spoken gratitude or some dried nettles that are meaningful to me, or just cleaning up trash in that place and doing some caretaking in the place. And another piece is, for me, looking for ways in my life to give monetarily to the cultures that have stewarded the land for thousands of years. That feels really good to do. So one of the great ways to start to deepen into foraging is to do what's known in geology terms as the streak test. And that's basically where you pick up a rock and you scratch it on another harder rock. So as you do this, you start to learn about the different textures and what textures are supportive of pigment making and which are not. And it's just a really beautiful process, as you'll see here. Everyone has a different style of doing the streak test. This is some students. And we always wash these off and turn the rocks over when we leave so that we don't leave our mark there. This is a totally different place, different kind of streak test. This is in Eastern Oregon, really beautiful, different rock beings there. Streak test. So this is a moment where I want to just say, do be careful when you're grinding pigment. That's a term my mother would appreciate. Do be careful, dear. Wear a mask, because even if rocks are not toxic themselves and they can have harmful heavy metals in them, although most of the iron oxides don't have that. If something is on the surface of the earth, it's much more likely to be benign than if it's buried deep in the earth. But still, particulates in your lungs build up over time and give you nasty conditions. So wear a mask, think about wearing gloves, take care of yourself, do your own research. Don't take my word for how to protect yourself. Do your own research on that and decide what feels best to you. All right. Okay, so Pigments. I talked about wild, I want to talk about pigments. There are many different kinds of what I consider to be wild pigments. So I'm just going to kind of go through them and introduce them to you. These are stone pigments, many of which I gathered and some of which I was given, and they are all from the West Coast. And I would love to tell you about each of the personal histories that I have with these rocks and all of the beautiful days that went into meeting them, but I don't have time for that right now. So here they are ground, and here they are in little vials. This is the Wild Pigment Project library. So I keep small quantities of the pigments that I gather so that I can show, so that I can study them and show them and share them with other people. And that feels great. I've talked about rocks. Pigments also come from soil, and the way that you prepare soil is that you either dry it and use a sieve to sift out the fine particles, or you put it in water and do a process called levigation that also applies to the grinding rocks, not just soil. And that helps you remove, levigation helps you remove organic material and get the finest particles out. Now, when it comes to pigments and making paint, a lot of it is about particle size and how fine you want it to be and that sort of thing. So I just wanted to show you what that looks like. Here's a big rock. As you can see, it has many colors in it. And then that plate has many different colors on it. And those all came from smaller rocks, but they reflect that variation that you see in the larger rock. So here I am futuring soil by crushing this rock. And if it doesn't easily crush, it probably doesn't want to be a pigment. So this is what it looks like when it becomes pigment. And this is showing how the different areas of rock in one small area have many different hues. And this is what they look like painted out. So that covers mineral pigments, stone pigments. And now I want to touch on botanical pigments, which many of you are really familiar with as dyers. So dye is one thing that botanical pigments are really good at. And the difference between a dye and a pigment, if you don't already know, and actually not a pigment, really I should say a paint. Pigment, in this context, people like artists often use the word pigment to describe dry pigment and dye to describe something that is soluble. But pigment is a broader word that also just really refers to colorants in animals and plants and stones. So a pigment, an artist pigment, a dry pigment, will sink to the bottom of water generally, whereas a dye will stay suspended. So an ink is essentially a dye that has been reduced and concentrated. And then there's a third thing, which many of you know about, which I consider to be sort of the bridge between people who work with stone pigments or dry artist pigments and people who work with dyes, and that is lake pigments. So a lake pigment, and that word comes from actually lac, for a lac insect, not a body of water. But a lake pigment is a dye that is mordanted on to a mineral salt. So I'll show you some pictures of that. But those are the three different, or the two different, well, there's actually three, you'll see, categories of things. So ink, this is some iris ink, which was actually in that little shell, the green in the shell here. That's iris ink. Here's iris ink, here's walnut ink, which I love. I use it in all my work because it's so abundant, and I talk about it a lot because it's my favorite sort of introductory foraged pigment. This is some inks made by Jason Logan, who is an ink maker in Toronto, the Toronto Ink Company, who does beautiful work and has his book Make Ink. This is also Jason's probably pokeberry ink. This is artist Marjorie Morgan's beautiful ink paintings. She's on the East Coast. And so now lakes. This is Natalie Stopka, who contributed this welled lake from plants that she grew to Ground Bright last November. And so I'll just show you what this process, if you're scratching your head, it starts out with a dye. That's what you see in the little jar. And then you add alum to it and warm. You stir it around, you dissolve the alum, and then you add soda ash to that. And so the alum makes the solution acidic. The soda ash is basic. And when you add the soda ash, aluminum hydroxide, a new compound, and the metal settles out, forms bonds with the dye, settles to the bottom, and then you have potassium sulfate, which I believe is essentially really works as a fertilizer for plants. I don't know about pouring your lake potassium sulfate on a plant, but, and then you have carbonic acid that is the fizzy, so that goes out. And what that leaves you with is this flocculant, or this material on the coffee filter there that you can then dry and grind, turn into dry pigment, and then mix with a medium as paint. So here's that beautiful graphic was made by Ashley Whiteloff, and these are also her lakes. So she works at the Beach Conservatory, Book Conservatory at the Knight Library at the U of O. And she has made a lot of different lakes. And one thing that's interesting about lakes is they don't always turn out how you expect. They often don't. So you can see the purple pansy is green, for example. And this is what they look like painted out. They're really beautiful. They're not always light fast. Light fastness is a big question for people often. And often mineral pigments are completely light fast for thousands of years, and often botanical pigments are less light fast, but there are exceptions to that. So here are my little laking experience filters that I did with Noelle from her dye baths. That's logwood, marigold, and madder. So it's great if you have an exhausted dye bath, you can make a lake with it. And yeah, that I think is an area that dyers can really enter into pigment making, because they have exhausted dye baths, and you know, why not do something fun with them? And I'll just touch on, this is indigo leaves. Scott Sutton, pigment hunter, has been involved in a lot of indigo projects, and he grew these on some Superfund land in Portland to help regenerate the land. And then you can make this. It's sort of another way that plants and minerals can go together, and it's a Maya lake pigment, so it's minerals bonded to clay. And I just briefly want to talk, speaking of minerals, or actually I said minerals, but I meant plant pigments bonded to clay. But I was getting ahead of myself, because these are minerals that are, some of them are attached to clay. And I just wanted to briefly touch on what a synthetic pigment is, so that you know, because a synthetic or manufactured pigment is, it's some sort of process that has involved heat, minerals, sometimes organic material, chalk, carbon, and then aluminum, or this we have cadmium red, we have ultramarine, which has aluminum in it, we have cobalt blue, we have iron oxide that was manufactured. So these are all manufactured as an industrial process, and sometimes some of these are referred to as natural, because they are not, they are you know, mineral of mineral origin, and they're attached to clay. So like 90% of the pigment could be a clay with 10% of mineral and other chemical process, but not organic chemical, because that is synthetic organic. I know this is a lot of information. I hope it's not overwhelming, but I just, since these are so prevalent in our world, I wanted to show you these are organic pigments, and organic is referring to the dead creatures that are present in coal tar, oil, petroleum products. So these are probably made from petroleum. Initially it was coal tar, and organic chemicals can be made to mimic many of the organic substances in the world. So alizarin or madder was one of the early synthesized organic pigments. Oh, and lastly, waste stream pigments. What do I mean when I say waste stream pigments? I mean things you pick up off the ground, or like this piece of rust that I pulled off an old rusty car in a dump. Well, it wasn't really in a dump, it was in a field that had been an old dump, and some copper that was getting thrown out. The yellow is from the line in the middle of the road. My artist friend Rebecca Childers shared that one with me. I thought it's just totally brilliant. There's some creosote from my fireplace, and the blue is happening because the copper soaked in vinegar and salt, and that can be really toxic, so only do that with a mask and proper ventilation. The chalk is like climber's chalk that I found lying around. So here's the road paint getting ground into pigment, and here's the copper, what happens as it soaks. And I'm not going to say too much about this, but I just wanted to show it because last week I was thinking hard about Prussian blue. It was invented in this early 1700s and supposedly was one of the early organic synthetic pigments. And I really wanted to understand what it was. And so I've been looking it up, and then this sounds made up, but I went out to my studio 20 minutes later, and I was actually setting up that photo of the waste stream pigments. And I had some of this creosote from my stove on my hand, and I dipped it into the rust water, and then I wiped it off on a rag, and it was blue. It had turned blue. And so I think I actually accidentally made Prussian blue. Found out I need to be quite careful with that. It's ferrocyanide. It's usually inert in most forms, but it can release a gas. So please don't try and recreate that. But I think it's an indication of a communication with matter, between me and matter. So I wanted to share that quickly. Okay, I'm gonna kind of jet into high speed here. Amy, I don't know how I'm doing for time, but let me know if, let me know maybe when I have 7 minutes left, something like that.
Wait, it's 12:41 right now. So, but just keep doing your thing. You don't have to go high speed. Just
do your thing. I don't really like high speed.
Yeah, I don't think you would either.
Yeah.
That's not your vibe. All right,
yeah.
Do your thing.
Okay, so I'm backing up a little bit to show you what my personal journey was with learning about wild pigments. And the place I started was in around 2007. I had used natural pigments years ago in grad school. I painted with chlorophyll and some ochre, but the chlorophyll was very fugitive, and the ochre, I just thought it was sort of a little bit boring color. So I don't feel that way now, but at the time I did. So I really wanted bright, exciting colors, and I wanted to stop using the synthetic pigments. So I got those out of my studio. I said, okay, I'm only using natural pigments. And over time, I slowly purchased pigments online from various different natural pigment vendors, and they came from all over the world. So that's what we're looking at here. These are natural pigments that were mined from different sites all over the world. And this is one of the first paintings I did with these natural pigments. I'm not going to go into too much detail about what's going on with these. I could talk volumes. That was a painting of a place in Vermont. This is a painting of here where I am, that picture I showed you of the river. And this is a huge painting of nearby, the place where those Queen Anne's lace or wild carrot flowers were. And I just really experimented a lot with the natural pigments, trying to get as many as I could from what I had. There's one in there that is a synthetic organic pigment. Maybe you can guess which. This is a lot of madder. And I wanted to prove to myself that I could make bright, bright colors with these pigments. So around that time, I was painting about my relationship with the land, and I felt like there was something missing at the center of it. And to me, it had to do with synthetic pigments, with this culture of poisoning and toxicity and of emptiness of history. I didn't, when I made this painting, know much about the local history here. And I think it's called grief untanglement. And that whole, in retrospect, it feels like that's the synthetic color in this painting, and that's what it represents. I also started working with objects, because I wanted to integrate the objects into outdoor places. I wanted to make an offering through my work to the place by leaving these things. And I put them there, but I didn't leave them there because these pigments weren't from the place, and it didn't really feel right to me. So I dove deeper into making my own pigments. I had a lot of material that I'd been gathering for years, and I had tentatively ground them, but there was something that was keeping me from working with them, and that was that, you know, I didn't know what it meant for me, a person with my background, to use the actual body of the land here without really understanding the history of it. And so that brought me into the journey of connecting with the Talking Stones people, with Esther, and also, this was the first project that I did with my own pigments. I painted these leaves and I left them in a park. But I hadn't made a big painting yet. And the first one I did was this. This is called Animal Village, and this painting has a whole story that, just in brief, involved a really intuitive kind of teaching that I received from a place, and then a connection that I made with Northern Paiute elder Wilson Miwa Jr. And I had a conversation with Wilson Miwa about what it meant for me to use these pigments, and he said, if it feels good, it's good. If it doesn't feel good, it's not good. And that was very, very, very helpful to me. It allowed me to listen more deeply and to proceed with this, and to proceed with sharing and exploring. So this was sort of an energetic portrait of different kinds of pigments and what they feel like. The top left being all pigments I foraged, and then below that being mined earth pigments, and to the right, vegetable pigments, and then the top right, of course, synthetic, organic synthetic pigments. This was a show up in Portland, and I had the pleasure to meet Scott Sutton there. He is a pigment forager, AKA pigment hunter, who really knows a lot about geology, has worked with the Confederated Tribes of Siletz, I believe, on some pigment projects, and is just a really generous person who just recently moved to Taos, where he's starting a whole pigment residency program. And he came to visited me because Melanie Anchetta, who I had briefly connected with but hadn't met yet, knew that I was there, and she sent him over to meet me, and he generously came and gave me these beautiful pigments that he had foraged and was studying with Melanie. So the next people I got to meet about a year later are these two. Melanie Anchetta, who's the pigment researcher I mentioned earlier, and Heidi Gustafson. And I met them and told them my plans for Wild Pigment Project, and they were just so amazingly supportive and encouraging, and we had lots of ideas together, and they both supported the first early Ground Bright subscriptions with pigment contributions, and we continue to collaborate and learn together. But I went up and met them in Bellingham area, Washington, and this is Melanie's Pigment Research Center. She's in the process of starting an offering that's just incredible, where she's opening up her library and her files of research materials, and that you can access by subscription, which I'm so excited about. So this was her space. This is her little bottles. And then this is Heidi's ochre archive and her pigment collection, her ochre archive collection, her work here, her beautiful sacred altar work. So I saw this stuff and it kind of blew my mind, because I think for a lot of people who work with pigments, at least for me, for many years, it was very solitary. I didn't know that other people did it. And then to feel so much resonance with how we work was just, it was really intense. These are Heidi's hands, and here we are playing with rocks, as she calls it. So I started this thing, Wild Pigment Project. I'm gonna go kind of fast through this. In the beginning, I had about this many people that I knew of who were making, working with pigments in the world. And I thought, like, wow, there's so many of us, it's exciting. And you know, it's growing, it's always growing. This is a resource on the website, just so much information and knowledge in these books. And this is just one little segment, so I encourage you to check that out under suggested readings. And through Wild Pigment Project, I just got to know a lot of other pigment people. So this is the work of Nancy Pobance, who has been gathering pigments in Eastern Oregon since 1996. So this is a practice that she has really been developing for a long time, and she's an amazing person. This is one of her earlier collections. This is Simon van Donkelaar, whose 100-mile art project inspired me years ago, and who is continuing to work with projects. This is Catalina Christensen. She was born in Colombia and works in London, and is a co-founder of the Wilderness Art Collective. And this is Elaine Suhui, whose studio Inner Fields hosts gatherings for people to discuss embodying ecological consciousness. She works with earth pigments really beautifully. There are some of her pigments. This is Tennessee artist Amanda Brazier. She works with earth pigments as well and teaches. Here are her pigments. This is Carolyn Ross, who works in England. She often lives on a boat, and she studies ancestral art materials and teaches and writes and makes art. Here's her pigment journal and some of her supplies. She makes quill pens and oak ink. This is the work of Thomas Little, who some of you know as a rural pen. He is a poet, genius, alchemist, in my opinion, and he does things that are really arcane and beautiful, and I love his work, such as this. This is him dissolving a gun in sulfuric acid, which he did last year to create a pigment contribution for Ground Bright, and then the 22% of our proceeds went to Lead to Life, which is an organization that takes guns, melts them down, makes them into shovels, and then uses the shovels to plant trees in areas of gun violence. And they also do so much other work, deep, deep healing deep healing work. Okay, this is artist Karma Megan Barnes working. She's a New Zealand artist who lives and works in Australia, and she's an installation artist, social practice artist who does huge public pigment-oriented installations that are very participatory. This is my friend Sasha Dewar, who's really a dye revolutionary. Probably many of you are familiar with her work, but she's really changed how we think about dye and using waste materials and even bringing natural dyes to industry. This is Britt Bowles, who just she's the co-producer of the Natural Dye podcast, which is really exciting. She's also an indigo farmer and makes these beautiful Lake Maya pigments. And lastly, this is Maibe Maracolo, who's a Brazilian artist who I wanted to show you because her work is beautiful and because she works with plants from the Brazilian savanna, and she makes a lot of really gorgeous lakes, which she is making into pastels now. Her work is totally stunning. She's a designer, textile designer and artist. So just very quickly, Ground Bright, it's this pigment of the month thing. I'm almost done here. And you can subscribe to it. 22% of the proceeds go to support organizations that are relevant to the land where the pigment was gathered. And this is what the first 10 months of the subscription, these are the pigments from that. And these are some people. This is Esther Stutzman, the Kalapuya elder. The first contribution went to her. And this is Melanie Ancheta's research studio, Native Paints Revealed. This is Lead to Life people with their shovels. This is the Intertribal Friendship House in Oakland. This is Open Space Institute on the East Coast. And Surfers Against Sewage. These are all people that we've given to this year. This is the Tennessee River Gorge protection people. This is Ground Shots podcast. My friend Kelly Moody interviews ecologists and land tenders and artists all over this continent. She's nomadic. This is the Fire Sticks Alliance Indigenous Corporation in Australia that are bringing the practice of cultural burning back to the land. And this is the Bears Ears Intertribal Coalition that is working to protect the cultural landscapes in the Bears Ears area. There's a lot of lawyer stuff happening around that right now, so it ain't over. And lastly, this is the Rural Organizing Project here in Oregon that does a lot of work for economic and racial equity. And the only thing I have left to say is that last month's proceeds from Ground Bright went to supporting an equitable opportunity scholarship that Wild Pigment Project is offering to people who self-identify as coming from underinvested or marginalized communities. So If you are interested in applying for that, please do. It's up to $500 for you to study with any pigment practitioner anywhere in the world that you want to work with. And please, everyone, help spread the news about that. And additionally, another great person to, or another great organization to contribute to is Crafting the Future. They are also working for equitable opportunities in craft. So that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Tilka. If you wanna, there you go.
Stop sharing. Okay.
I put on the chat a little earlier so we could just kind of get some questions in, but I don't know how many we can actually get to because, I mean, I could start at the top, but where are you, Tilka? There you are. So will you be, I know on your site you have the pigment people, so I know people are asking about, can we get a list of those people? And I know, so the pigment people, it's on your website.
Absolutely.
So that we just saw the pictures of, you can.
Yeah, and they're, each person has their own long bio, links to their work, and pictures of their work too. So it's a whole world to explore working through that pigment people page. And they're just anyone. It's not a club. It's just anyone who wants to be part of, wants to be represented at Wild Pigment Project. So if you're interested, please be.
And then will you? One of the things that I'm going to suggest is, and you can say no. But a lot of these questions, can I send them to you, and then you could answer them, and incorporate them in the little, the blog post that I'll put up later.
Of course.
Actually, this weekend I'll put it up sometime. Okay, so we'll have a lot of these questions answered, you guys, sometime over next week, probably early next week. I don't know what your time schedule is like, Tilka, but.
Yeah, I'm going to be out of town early next week, so it'll probably be by the end of next week.
Okay, all right. So I can always add them in. And the other thing is you guys can do is rewatch this, because I'll have that post up, and you can look for all the people that Tilka has mentioned, and maybe some of your questions will be answered there. Tilka, I made a note to remind you about your 2 donation.
I did. I did.
Do you feel like that's fully covered? Okay, all right.
I do, yeah. And I know, I feel sad that I maybe didn't rush more so that I could take more questions, because I would love to hear questions.
Well, Kathy.
Here I am.
Do you I mean, it's 12:58. Can we take a couple questions?
Oh, absolutely. I think that it's okay to go over a bit.
Okay.
I mean,
right.
This is super important.
I'm just going to be fair and start at the top. So what do you mix with the pigments to make your paint?
Great question. All kinds of things. The sort of entry-level thing, I think, for me, because it's easy, is gum arabic. You can buy it at a health food store. It's food grade. It's the gum of an acacia tree that doesn't grow here. But there are things that do grow here, and that's kind of my exploring edge right now. Cherry sap from a dying cherry tree, for example. Also, there are just many, many plants that have sticky substance. And so I think it's a really, it's a good path of inquiry. But anything that is, you just need your pigment and your water and your glue. Also egg tempera.
All right. Somebody's asking, I was curious how exhausted can an indigo vat be to make it into a paint pigment? I have a very exhausted indigo vat, but would it be too far gone?
I think it's really different. That's the thing that I've learned about lakes, is that you can't predict. So I would try it. Just try a small jar with the exhausted bath in there, add the alum, add the soda ash, and see what happens. They vary wildly, and I don't teach them yet because of that variation. You just can't predict what's going to happen. So yeah, experiment.
Let's see. I'd love to know more about how to make lake from an exhaust bath. Maybe the name of a book, maybe your favorite book, or if you have that maybe on a blog post on your site.
Yeah, I will add that.
Okay. Let's see.
There are a few.
Can you use rock mineral pigments on cloth, and do you just use a mortar and pestle?
You can use them on cloth. In fact, the first set I ever bought was from Earth Hues in Seattle. And it was designed for using with soy milk as the glue to paint on cloth. So there is a whole world of that, absolutely. And then I use a mortar and pestle, and then the second step that I didn't describe is, but it was pictured in that little 4 pictures about making a lake, is a muller. It's a glass muller. You don't have to buy an expensive glass muller. You can use the bottom of your mortar and pestle. So like, here's a mortar. And if you have a smooth bottom like this, you can, on a plate, a very flat plate or a piece of glass, you can further grind your pigment. And that's also how you integrate the medium into your pigment.
So there's been a couple questions, but that kind of are around this, but how you connected with the indigenous community or communities that you've connected with.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a long story, but I was essentially walking in a park near my house, and I saw some people who were attending that talking stone that I talked about. And I knew that it was a Kalapuya talking stone. And so I asked them, I said, I'm interested in meeting someone who can tell me about pigments. I went into it kind of rough on the edges. They said, well, why don't you help us take care of these talking stones? And so that evolved into a relationship, and eventually to meeting a Kalapuya person, because that was at the time it was a mostly white committee. But I think it's just, yeah, individual personal relationships where you are, and being curious about indigenous politics so that you can be involved, not just in your area, but in the areas that surround your area. Yeah.
Thank
Good
you.
question.
Yeah. I just read how the flour of my indigo vat can be dried and then used as a pigment. I tried this yesterday, but need to know what to mix it with. Any advice?
Yeah, I don't know. Indigo isn't my specialty. Britt Bowles probably has. She's of Sea Spell Fiber is her Instagram handle. And I know that indigo is often sold just ground and used as a pigment in places, you know, like where all they have is earth pigments, and then they'll have this ground indigo. That it's
Right.
not even a lake.
No.
But so,
It's
yeah,
the pigment. It's already an extracted pigment. So
Yeah.
the indigo powder that you buy, if you buy indigo powder and not directly from the, you know, taking it from the plant, or you could extract it from the plant too. It's, and there's lots of resources online there. But if you have the flour of your indigo vat, you can just scoop that off, dry it. You can mix it with gum arabic. You could use soy milk, any binder. So when I think when we talk about binders, we're talking about any additional material that will help physically adhere it to the surface of a piece of paper or potentially some fabric. So indigo flour, it's just gum arabic, soy milk, pretty much anything you want like that.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
All right, we're going to take one more question, then we'll wrap it up, and then I'll get all these questions off the chat and see what you can answer later. I think a lot of people are just telling you how awesome you are too.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Can you use these pigments for screen printing on textiles and or paper?
Yes, you can. Yes. Marjorie Morgan is doing a lot of experimenting with printing. She's been doing monoprints, and a lot of people are printing with these, artists all over. I was trained as a printmaker, and so I haven't done too much printing since I've gotten really into wild pigments, but I'm sort of holding it as my little treat to go deep into that, because lots of people are working with this. So yes, absolutely. So printing on both paper and fabric, and even screen printing is possible. Yeah.
All right, great. Well, let's give Tilka a round of applause.
Yeah, Tilka, thank you so much. My goodness. That was incredible. Super incredible.
And Kathy, once you wrap it up and
oh yeah, I have an outro.
Online stuff later.
Then we'll unmute everybody. You can all say hello. Yeah. So Tilka, thank you so much. That was so inspiring, powerful presentation.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it was wonderful. Thank you. So that kind of concludes this Feedback Friday, but next week we are going to welcome Rebecca Burgess. And Rebecca is the founder of Fibershed. She's the author of Harvesting Color. She also has a new book out called Fibershed, Growing a Movement of Farmers, Fashion Activists and Makers for a New Textile Economy. Rebecca is a pretty extraordinary person. On the coming after Tilka's presentation, I think you guys are just going to be like all land-centered and locally focused. You're just going to be like, what can I do here? Because it's such a beautiful and poetic way of thinking about how we live in a very modern age, but still very grounded where we are. There's lots of tools here for us to think about. Those of you who do know Rebecca, she is a trained weaver and dyer. She used to work in education. She has over a decade of experience working in her local Fibershed area. And she's built this extensive network of farmers and producers and makers, which is kind of the basis of her latest book in Northern California. And she's been piloting innovative fiber systems at a community scale and has received a lot of interest on this. There's over 53 fiber sheds worldwide now. So that means that there's 53 other locations where people are trying to figure out all of these same questions. So yeah, please join us. This is going to be amazing. So we get to hang out with the goddess of the Fibershed mothership herself and get incredibly inspired and informed. So you don't want to miss this. That's next Friday, same time. Thank you again for joining us. Thank you, Tilka. It was really amazing, really beautiful. We're now going to be like we're in mud everywhere. I have my little thing of fermented mud right here, ready to paint with. I'll send you some. It's so much fun. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time. And Amy is going to unmute you to all say goodbye.
I don't know why I can never figure it out, Kathy, but you guys unmute yourselves.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Hi. Hi, Kim.
Thank you.
Velma.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone.
Thank you.
Guys. Hi, Emily.
Hi, Kathy.
You.
Hi,
We want you to
Kathy.
do a presentation.
Oh, I would love it.
Okay, good. Emily, this is Amy. Amy.
Oh,
Emily, a call.
hi, Emily.
All right. Thank you.
Oh, I see my mom there. I see her.
Where?
Oh, where? Come on. Tell her to say something so we can see her.
Mom, say
Quiet
something.
person.
Oh, keep talking.
I feel like the quiet person, and I'm not.
I want to tell you that she's used some natural dyes for that.
Oh, there
shirt.
she is.
Nice shirt. Nice shirt. Nicely done.
There she is. That's LED.
Hey, LED.
Hi.
LED. It's hot up here. I've lost you so many times, but I think I want a book to find out more about this.
Don't worry, we'll get some books.
Okay.
There's lots of resources here. Lots of books out there. There's lots.
Suggested reading. Check out suggested readings on the Wild Pigment Project
Yeah.
website.
Yeah.
Tilka's got lots of stuff there. Hi, Diane. Hi, Betsy.
Hi.
Betsy, did you get your package yet?
No.
Okay. It's coming.
Liz,
I swear.
did Liz get dressed up today? Liz
Yeah.
Aston? All right.
Liz. Liz.
Hi.
Liz.
Hi, Sasha.
Hi. Thank you for the incredible stuff.
Oh, thank you.
Amazing. Yeah.
Hi, Elaine
So
from
amazing.
Cosa Arts, who I always want to say hi
She has
to.
the most beautiful clothes on her website. You just have to check this
Aw,
out.
Thank
Amy.
you.
Oh,
She
wow.
uses Sally's
Yeah,
cotton.
Sally Fox fabric.
Oh,
really beautiful.
nice.
Yeah, she does really nice stuff. She has this like indigo dyed denim thing that I've just been looking at.
Was that?
Awful
Say
nice
that again?
Yeah.
It's Cosa Arts on online, KOSA.
KOSA.
She uses Sally Fox's organically grown, naturally colored cotton. But you know, Sally gets most of her stuff processed from some of the best mills in the world. So the fabric itself is just exceptionally nice.
I've been working with one of her fabrics that was done in Japan. And every time you press the fabric, the smell of cedar comes out because wherever it was, and you're just like, oh my God, it's so amazing.
Oh, very, very nice.
Wow.
Very nice. All right.
Kathy and I got to spend two nights on Sally's farm. It was kind of our last big trip together. We were sleeping out in trailers by the sheep. And,
the
so
chickens.
Helping with the irrigation system.
Yeah, we were like schlepping irrigation pipes.
Yeah, so we went to pick up fabric and suddenly we were feeding sheep. It's like, oh, you're here.
Yeah, exactly. Another pair of hands.
Got to work.
Yeah, that woman works so hard.
So hard, yeah.
Anyway, bye guys.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, Breeze. Bye, Diane. Bye, Nan. Nice to see you.
I don't know where Nan is.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Amy.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you. Bye.
Look at everybody's going so fast. It's
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bye.
Hi, Nan.
Christine. Hi,
Hi,
Christine.
Amy.
How are you?
Hi. Hi.
Hi.
Nan, you keep getting shuffled and shuffled.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
All right. Look at LEDs hanging out, though. That's right. LEDs.
You had someone in your background a while ago, a few minutes ago.
Yeah. He said, we've got the everybody's talking, so now it's time to get packed up for the drive to Albany, New York.
Oh boy.
Really?
Yeah, second adventure. Yep.
Well, you have fun.
I feel like this is open house, but Mom, do you see Nan over here? Do you remember? Did you guys meet at was it
Up in the Maine.
Yeah, we were up in Maine. That's right. That's what it was.
Yeah.
With the slow fashion retreat, Mom.
Yeah. Eating lobster together.
Do you see? Oh, it looks like she's frozen. Looks like she's having a bad internet experience.
Oh dear.
But yeah, Diane, we won't be talking after again.
I don't know, Amy.
I'll talk with Diane after this, or Brees. But all right.
This is wonderful. Okay,
yeah,
bye-bye.
Whole other thinking about natural dyes, right? And pigments. Mind blown. Get ready for more. All right, well, let's see, I have to stop the recording. Yes.